In the summer of 1975, you could ride home on a 1976 motorcycle. Well, that was the first strange thing about it, and the second, a two-stroke that burned oil and fouled plugs, running an engine format the whole industry had already decided was finished on public roads. Nothing about it looked like a machine that could make the four-cylinder Honda the press was calling a masterpiece look slow. And yet this imperfect little twin was about to do exactly that. This isn't just the story of a certain motorcycle. It's the moment a dying engine refused to die and the one season it made everyone stop and pay attention. When Honda unveiled the CB400F, they handed a certain kind of rider exactly what they'd been waiting for. 4 cylinders in a package that weighed less than 400 pounds, a 6-speed gearbox, a 4-into-1 exhaust that sounded like something from a much bigger machine, and the fit and finish of a motorcycle Honda had spent years getting right. The magazines fell over each other. They called it the son of Superhawk. Cycle magazine once wrote that if you couldn't respond to the CB400F's mechanical presence, you should immediately change your sport to checkers. The bike had a following before most riders had seen one in person, and it had an identity. The rider who bought a CB400F wasn't just buying a motorcycle, they were making a statement about what precision meant, what motorcycling was supposed to feel like when it was done correctly. Smooth, controlled, refined. They were right, and they knew it. The 4-stroke had won. The argument was over. Half a world away, in Japan, a group of Yamaha engineers working through a problem handed to them from the racetrack were about to complicate things considerably. The complication hadn't started in a boardroom. It had started on a circuit in the mid-1960s, when Yamaha's RD400 Grand Prix racer was giving engineers a specific recurring problem. A 2-stroke engine that produced extraordinary power but only in a narrow band. A sudden wall of acceleration that arrived at a precise point in the rev range and disappeared just as quickly. Riders either mastered the transition or got into trouble with it. Engineers watching the footage watched the same moment play out lap after lap. The throttle opened a fraction early, the power arriving before the rider was set, the bike moving sideways when it should have been tracking straight. The question they kept coming back to was simple. What if the engine could be more predictable without giving up what made it fast? What came out of that question, after years of development through the RD350 and into the 400, was what Yamaha called torque induction, a reed valve intake system that let fuel and air enter more efficiently across a wider range of engine speeds. The surge didn't disappear, it spread out. The 2-stroke became something a real road, with real corners, could actually use. But Yamaha never pretended the RD400 was perfect, and neither should we. The testers of the day were direct about it. The new Keystone piston rings were more reliable than the Dykes rings in the RD350, but Cycle Magazine's editors noted that the old rings created less drag on the cylinder walls and translated to more top-end power. A trade-off, not a pure upgrade. The stock fork oil needed changing before the front end behaved the way an experienced rider expected. And the horn, the single item that kept Cycle World from declaring the RD400 the world's first perfect motorcycle, was so feeble the editors wrote that it wouldn't make a hungover wino flinch, let alone inform some quadraphonically deafened cigar-puffing lardo that he is blindly stuffing his gas-sucking smogmobile into the lane you are occupying. Harsh. Accurate. What Yamaha did offer for $1,219 out the door was 377 pounds wet, 35.5 horsepower at the rear wheel, a 6-speed gearbox, and the first cast aluminum wheels ever fitted to a production motorcycle by a major manufacturer. A 2-stroke twin that returned 45 miles per gallon and topped out just shy of 100 miles per hour. A complicated machine that asked something from whoever sat on it. So who bought a bike like that? College students like Drew Imity. He was 20 years old, enrolled at California Polytechnic State University in San Luis Obispo, and walked into a Yamaha dealer in 1977 looking for a motorcycle. The bike he found was a leftover 1976 model. He paid $1,285 out the door. The dealer told him to come back after 500 break-in miles. That was on a Wednesday. Drew told him he'd see him Friday. The dealer looked at him the way people look at someone they suspect is slightly unhinged. True to his word, Drew finished finals Thursday night, logged the miles, and appeared at the service counter Friday morning. When the work was done, he pointed the little two-stroke south toward Pasadena, then San Diego, then down to the Mexican border and back, then north to Chico, Humboldt, and all the way to the Canadian border, where he and the RD400 took a ferry to Vancouver Island before turning around. He had a tank bag, a small rear seat bag, and a wad of cash in his jacket pocket. That was it. The answer was never in the displacement. It was in what the displacement asked the rider to bring to it. Because the test results were telling a story, the four-stroke establishment was finding difficult to absorb. The RD400 ran the quarter mile in 14.01 seconds. That beat the CB400F. In group comparison tests, it was voted a worthy opponent for many of the era's 750 choices. Cycle magazine called it the quickest, fastest, best handling, and hardest braking lightweight ever tested. Cycle World placed it one anemic horn away from perfection. And riders who came to it from four-stroke machines kept reporting the same thing. A directness between the throttle and what happened underneath them that something heavier and smoother simply didn't deliver. Two strokes fire on every revolution. That 35.5 horsepower arrived differently than the same number from a Honda, more immediate, less willing to be polite about it. The CB400F asked you to trust it. The RD400 asked what you were going to do with what it gave you. If the two-stroke was the underdog, the second half of the story was a statement. And it wasn't a fluke, it was a forecast of something the four-stroke world wasn't ready to process. That's the version of the story everyone loves to tell. Two-stroke beats four-stroke. A noisy, oily little twin outperforms machines with twice the cylinders and the full weight of critical consensus behind them. But the truth, as it usually is, was a little more complicated, and more complicated, it turns out, doesn't mean less interesting. Here's why. Start with the king. The CB400F that the RD400 supposedly dethroned was, beneath all the magazine praise, already in serious trouble with the people actually buying motorcycles. Despite the rave reviews, the bike didn't sell. American riders found the ergonomics uncomfortable, the passenger accommodations too small, and the price too high. It didn't have enough chrome to interest one crowd and wasn't fast enough to interest another. Cycle magazine admitted the same features their editors loved had generated the greatest sales resistance. Honda discontinued the CB400F in 1977, 2 years before Yamaha discontinued the RD400. The king the two-stroke supposedly dethroned was already heading for the exit. Now look at what actually happened to the winner. The RD400 disappeared from the American market in 1979, not because a better two-stroke replaced it, because tightening emissions regulations made two-stroke street bikes commercially indefensible to produce and sell in the United States. The engine format the RD400 proved could compete didn't survive the decade. The four-stroke approach it embarrassed in magazine tests. That approach evolved into the inline four-cylinder architecture that has defined performance motorcycles for the 5 decades since. The engine that supposedly lost the argument in 1976 is everywhere today. The one that won is essentially gone. So the machine that beat the king was riding an engine format already running out of time, and the king it beat was already failing in the market. To some people, that takes the shine off the story. It shouldn't. Because strip all of it away, and what you're left with is this, a 400 cubic centimeter air-cooled two-stroke built by engineers drawing on a lineage that started with a 1960s Grand Prix racer priced at $1,200, running the quarter mile in 14 seconds, making the two leading motorcycle publications of the era run out of superlatives in the same month. And in the hands of a 20-year-old college student with a tank bag and a wad of cash, it got ridden to Canada and back in a week. That's not a machine in decline. That's a machine operating at the absolute limit of what it was built to be. The flaws don't shrink that. They're the reason it happened at all. Decades later, Drew Imity is still in motorcycles. He's co-owner of Superbike Course in Laguna Hills, California. A later RD400 he acquired, showing under 2,500 original miles, took best in class at the Barber Vintage Festival. The little two-stroke that cost $1,200 new changes hands today for anywhere between $2,500 and $9,000. Rare survivors in exceptional condition have sold for $15,000 and beyond. The Honda CB400F it supposedly killed commands similar prices. It turns out the market didn't care who won the argument in 1976. It just remembered which machines left something behind when they were gone. Some machines earn their place in memory not by winning or by being the most advanced or by outlasting their competition. They earn it by being exactly and completely what they were, at exactly the moment the people who found them needed something to be that. The ones still being talked about 40 years later are rarely the ones that won. They're the ones that asked something back. If this made you think about your very first motorcycle when you were in high school, drop a comment below and I'll hope to see you on the next one.